In this video, I want to show how you can connect this up to a local area network to use the built-in app, the app in an iPad or in your mobile phone to be able to control all of this, which is better because it gives you more screen to work with rather than this little screen here, and how you can do everything I did in the previous video. So let's jump right into it. Now what you need for this connection is, of course, your DBX Driverack PA2. You need a mobile device. I'll be using an iPad here because of the screen real estate I've got with this, but the app for controlling this is also on your mobile phone, iOS and Android devices. You also need an internet router of any sort. Basically, you don't need internet connection with this. You just need something that is able to give you a wireless LAN connection, and you need a cable like this, which is an Ethernet cable with an RJ45 connector that you can use to connect from the router to the DBX Driverack PA2, and then you connect this to the mobile device to the wireless network that is being generated by the router, and so you ensure that the mobile device and the DBX Driverack are in the same local area network, so you can establish communication. First thing you do is to connect this cable to an output, a LAN output, not to the input, which some people do, a LAN output in your router. So I'll connect it here to LAN output 2, set this somewhere, and then I'll connect the other end to the network connector or network port in the Driverack, which is here, like so. And then I'll power my Driverack. So I'll connect the internet in my mobile device to the Wi-Fi router, which is a TP-Link. As you can see, there's no internet connection, but that doesn't matter because I don't need internet to establish communication. And the app is called DBX Driverack PA2 here, and you can watch app for demo if you want. It's not really necessary in this case, but that's something you can do. I hit search for devices, give it a moment, and then my Driverack shows. So whatever Driverack is connected to the network, you see it here. This currently says my Driverack, and I'll hit the connect button. Now from my previous video, I talked about what you see here in this screen as to how that means shows your connection or the configuration from left, which is your input, all the way to your crossover and your outputs. That's basically what we have here, all the way from left to our output. So let's assume I want to do this setup from beginning again, like we did in the previous one. So I'll hit the wizard here. I'll have run all wizards, which simply means all three options under, which if you hit run all wizard, it runs setup wizard, runs auto EQ or level assist, and runs AFS, which is your advanced feedback suppression. And we'll touch on the auto EQ and the AFS in other videos, but we just want to run setup wizard for now. So I'll hit run setup wizard, which gives us this menu. So we've got run all setup, run input setup items, run EQ setup items, and run speaker/amp setup items. Want to run all setup items, and so I'll hit run all setup. And as you can see, whatever it is I'm doing here in the app also works here on the screen. So choose starting point is here on the app, and then also shows in the screen. So it asks me to choose starting point. I usually like going with new settings first, and then I'll hit next, starting from new settings, and give it a moment. Input configuration, if it's mono or stereo. So basically, if your output from your mixer is a mono output, you can just hit mono and connect to the left inputs in your DBX Driverack PA2. But I'll go with stereo because I want to have like a left and right output from my mixing console fed into the DBX Driverack PA2. I will hit next, and then it asks what is my graphic EQ configuration. So dual mono simply means you can set a different graphic EQ setting for your left and a different one for your right input, but I want whatever I set for my right input to be the same thing as my left input. So stereo linked is what I'll go for. And then you select your main speaker type. So we've got a bunch of speaker types here, And if your speaker type is not listed here, then you can go not listed. If your speaker type is listed here, for example, you select a PV speaker, it shows you a few models of the PV speakers, and there's a chance that your speaker model, even though the brand is here, model might not be listed, so you go not listed, or you can as well go not listed here anyway and hit next. Now passive or two-way, which is your speaker mode. I explained this in my previous video as that in this context, passive simply means your speaker handles your mid and your high frequencies, but two-way simply means your speaker handles you send a different signal to your high and you send a different signal to your mid frequency drivers. We don't want that. It's just for bi-amped loudspeaker, so we go for passive. Even if you're using an active loudspeaker, passive in this context doesn't mean passive and active in terms of loudspeaker and amplifier mode. It just means if your speaker is bi-amped or your speaker reproduces mid and high frequencies together. So I'll go for passive and hit next. Are you using subs? Yes. What sub speaker? Similar to what we had in our main speaker, I will just go for not listed. If you have your brand here and your brand model, that's even better. So not listed. Sub configuration, mono or stereo. I did mono the other time. I'll just select stereo here, but I've already explained that subwoofer. It doesn't really matter if you go for mono or stereo. If you've got two subs, you can still use mono because it's quite difficult to tell left from right in terms of low frequencies because of the long wavelength they have. And your low frequency instrument anyway, they are panned to the middle. Kick drum, bass guitar usually panned to the middle, so you're good with mono. But let's just select stereo for the sake of selecting stereo. Select high amplifier. You select your amplifier brand. If it's not here, you go not listed. If your speakers powered or active speakers, you also go for not listed, which is what I've selected. Low amplifier, not listed as well, which is the amplifier of your subwoofer. If the brand is not here or you're using an active subwoofer, you go for not listed. Apply the current changes, of course, yes, and then it takes a few moments to apply setup changes. Ask you to wait. Setup complete, and then you go back to home, and with home, similar to what you have on your screen, is what we have here. So from left to right, it tells us how we are set up. As you can see, a few of these things are gray other than the crossover. So crossover is all white, and graphic EQ, auto EQ, AFS, which is advanced feedback suppression, subharmonic synthesis, compressor, and input delay, they are all grayed out because we've not activated any of those. We'll get into all of them in subsequent videos. What we're interested in is our setup, which we just did, and of course to set up our crossover so that we'll have the right frequencies going into the left and the right, the top and the sub speakers. So we have left to right here, which is our input, going through a few of all of these processing that we have not turned on yet, the auto EQ down to the compressor and input delay, and then to the crossover. So if I hit the crossover here, it takes us to the crossover session. Now it's currently locked, we can't do anything here. This is how the app is configured. I kind of like it so you don't accidentally touch things. You hit this padlock here to unlock. Adjusting crossover can potentially cause damage to speaker. That is not good. We can turn them off when we're doing our settings. And okay, we have two outputs here, our high and our low. Remember, we don't have our mid, so we handle the high first, and we want a high pass frequency, which is our crossover frequency, to be for the high 100 hertz and above. So my high pass frequency is 100 hertz. That's all good. I'm not adjusting that anymore, so just keep it at 100 hertz. And low pass frequency, if you want a low pass frequency, then you can set that where you want. We don't want a low pass frequency anyway for our highs. If you want to protect your speakers, or you want to put a low pass frequency so it doesn't go above reproduce sound above a certain frequency, you can do that, but just want to take that out. Gain, you want to increase your high gain for some reason, do some gain staging, you can do that here. I just like to keep it at 0 dB. I do my gain staging from the amp or from the speakers themselves, and that's all good with my high. Then you can select your high frequency slope type under here. So yeah, the Lindquist Riley or the Butterworth are the two types they've got here. So Butterworth 42 dB, which gives you a sharp cut at the high frequency, or the LR48, whichever one works. I just go for the LR48, gives me a sharp cut at my high frequency, and my low at my high pass filter. I don't have my low pass filter set up here, so that's all good. And then if we go to the low speakers, which is the sub, we have a high pass and a low pass frequency as well. My low pass frequency, which is my crossover frequency, is set at 100 Hertz. That's the second one in the middle. And then I also want to have my low pass slope type as Lindquist Riley 48 as well. So I'll get a sharp roll off. Then I want to have a high pass frequency at 30 Hertz. Even though the subwoofer is meant to reproduce frequency from 20 Hertz, I still like to protect my subwoofer and then get something set from a high pass filter on it from about 30 Hertz, just as a means to protect it. And 30 Hertz set. And then the slope type I want to have here is Butterworth 12 or Lindquist Riley 12. Just a nice roll off, not something too drastic. This is all good. And polarity, you can keep it normal or inverted. I like to keep my polarity normal for both my high and my low. I can lock it back and go back to home. And so this is how we have this set up. When I connect my mixer to the input here at the behind the Driverack PA2, I have my signal going through, get to the crossover, and then it gets split into my high and my low, and I'm sure I have a good sound. So in the next video, we explore a few of these other processing, the auto EQ, the advanced feedback suppression, and probably the compressor and input delay. Other than that, that's all for this video. Thank you very much for sticking around till the end. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.